Thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you all for being here. So my name is Yara Antoniassi. I'm a research and data analyst for Data Alliance, which is a not-for-profit think and do tank. And one of our programs within Data Alliance, it's called Data Feminist. And our goal in this program is to produce evidence for policies that will accelerate intersectional feminist gender equality. So next slide, please. Yeah, this is the presentation. And next one. Okay, yeah, thank you. So we conducted a research project together with Where's My Transport and Rumble last year, end of last year, on gender and mobility in 2 Latin American cities. So Mexico City in Mexico and Lima in Peru. And there's little evidence about gender and mobility in Latin America, which is why we decided to focus on those 2 cities, because they're big cities and not prepared for walking or biking, for example. So people, and especially women, rely on public transportation. And this is particularly important in countries where gender roles are more prominent, such as those 2 cities, because there's evidence that if the household owns a car, for example, the male is more likely to take the car to work. So women need to rely more on public transportation. And we developed an online survey targeting women of different ages, occupations, and regions, so both the city center and the extended metropolitan area, and launched it on social media in both cities. And it's not a representative survey, it's not a census, but we have a diverse and large sample of answers that allow us to obtain valuable disaggregated findings, but it's not representative for the entire population, of course. So here are our main results. Here we have the 90% of the respondents feel unsafe using public transportation in both cities. So our survey was targeting women, so only women answered. And also we learned that over half of the respondents experience improper stares. Almost 40% received sexual comments and 15% were touched without their consent. This is the average for both cities, which were quite similar. And we also learned that the majority of harassment incidents occurred inside the vehicle or while they were waiting for it. And it happens throughout all periods of day in a similar rate. Know that we usually think that it's worst at night, but in those 2 cities, women reported to feel unsafe and to have harassment incidents throughout the entire day. And on the other hand, we also learned that only 9% of women who were harassed reported those incidents to the transport company or an employee of the company. And we also learned that 20% of the victims in Lima reported being harassed by one of the company employees, public transportation employees. So I think this is really important. And we also had some other questions about the impact of this issue on other areas of their life. And we learned that 60% of women turn down job offers due to the absence of safe and efficient modes of transport. So we can see how this is not only important for mobility itself, but it spills over to other areas of women empowerment and gender equality. Next one, please. I guess I can talk about this one as well right now, right, Joe?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So here are just some tips on data collection. We have many different ways of collecting data. There were a lot that were presented previously. And this depends, of course, on your purpose, the amount of budget that you have available, time and effort. So we mainly have qualitative methods, quantitative methods, and non-traditional data that is an growing research area. So qualitative methods, it was already talked about previously. So we have interview with users, focus group discussions, narrative analysis. For traditional quantitative methods, the most common way are online surveys, in-person surveys, and the analysis of existing data. But we have an ingrowing research area of non-traditional data, that the main 2 areas are CDRs, so cellular data that you can get from telecom companies, and you can see how people move based on this data. And we also have satellite image that you can capture, for example, distance to bus stations or train stations. So this is important for areas that it's hard for you to collect data in person. So it's a cheaper way to access those areas. But today I'm going to focus on just giving 2 hands-on tips on collecting data used in surveys because it's the easiest way to reach many people in an affordable way. But we always advocate that the best way to collect data and have reliable findings is to use different methods. But now I'm focusing on survey because it's the most affordable way to reach many people. So those are really hands-on tips. And the first thing to take into account when doing a survey design for users of public transportation is to consider all type of commuters, because we know that women tend to travel outside of typical 9 to 5 commuting hours, so sometimes off-peak hours, and also undertake shorter trips with multiple stops. And they also travel accompanied by others, so kids or elderly. And so for that, we should consider the concept of mobility of care that was written by Inés Chances de Madariaga, where she created a framework that recognizes and measures all the travel associated with caring and home-related tasks needed for reproduction of life. So this is an example here in the picture. You can see that designing a survey can be really tricky because you're not sure which options to include. And women had a limited choice of options in this case. And in reality, they checked one of those options, so shopping, strolling, coordinating visits. But in reality, they were all doing caring work, which accounted to be the second most common purpose of transport after employment. And so how do I know which options should I include in my survey? My suggestion is to do a pilot survey with an open question, or you can also do it through focus group discussions or interviews, just so you can get these answers from women. And then you can either gather this findings through text analysis, or if you have an interview, you can just analyze the answers of this interview. And then based on these answers, you can categorize them and include in your official survey. So this is a way to know how to design, because if we design it ourselves, usually we're going to have a male bias, which is usually what happens, and women won't be able to express everything that they need to express when answering your survey. And the second thing to think about it during the survey analysis is to disaggregate the results, not only by gender, but also by cross-cutting issues such as age, motherhood, income, regions they live, and travel times, because the travel patterns and needs are really different and should be taken into account as well. So the last thing I wanted to mention is to be as explicit as possible when asking the questions, because this is the only thing that will make it possible for you to have more valuable disaggregated insights. So one thing that is really common to have on surveys, and I've seen this a lot of times before, is, for example, a question with how would you rate the security of the railway station? And then there's a scale from 0 to 10, and the person will 0 being unsafe and 10 being safe. And first of all, scales are not that good to measure anything, because the feeling of security is really relative and depends on personal background. So if you just have a result of like an average of 7, you don't know what does that mean for each person. So it's really relative, but that's a whole other workshop on surveys. But when you analyze the results, for example, in this question, you can come up with the following finding that men and women both have an average security level of 7. And this don't tell you much, but in this case, even if they have the similar average of satisfaction with security, men might be more scared of being robbed, while women might be more scared of being harassed. That's really the case for Latin American cities, and that's what we find in our study. So my advice is just to really really be careful when designing those questions, so you can really capture what's behind it. And sometimes when trying to do research with disaggregated data, we end up having data that don't show you really valuable insights. You just have like one number for men, one number for women, but what does this really tell you? So that's it. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I'll share the link to the report that I mentioned. It is written in Spanish, unfortunately, but nowadays I think it's just easy to translate. Thank you.